Welcome, everyone. I am Rachel Smith, your host this evening for virtual Morning Pointe Foundation Caregiver Cafe. Our topic tonight is getting a good night's rest, sleep implications for healthy aging, and what you can do to sleep better. The topics we will cover this evening are if there is a connection between Alzheimer's and sleep, the role sleep plays in storing away the important parts of our day, and how sleep is involved in cleansing our brain and body. And here to guide us through this topic is our special guest presenter this evening, Lauren Whitehurst, an assistant professor at the University of Kentucky. Lauren has multiple degrees, including a PhD in psychology from the University of Kentucky. Lauren's research has focused on such topics as how sleep supports cognition and learning, and also how sleep plays a role in accelerated aging. Lauren, welcome. We are excited to have you as our presenter this evening.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I am just getting my slides on the screen to share with everyone. Thank you all for being with me on this Tuesday night. I'm just so excited to be with you all. And so as Rachel mentioned, the title of the talk is Getting a Good Night's Rest, Sleep Implications for Healthy Aging. So what I like to do to get us started, to, even though we're in this Zoom platform, to, in a sense, get to know each other just a little bit, is I'm going to ask you, each of you, just a few questions to understand kind of what your sleep looks like, kind of what your normal sleep patterns might be. Okay, so Rachel's going to help me do this. We're going to throw a couple of questions up on the screen, and I'm going to ask you all to select the option that most represents yourself. So how many times do you feel like you get the amount of sleep that you need each day? The question there is, I often get the amount of sleep I need each day, and your job is to endorse one of those four options that you see. Give you all a couple of seconds to get those votes in. And when Rachel sees that the majority of everyone has voted, she'll throw the answer up there for us. Okay, so what do we see? We see that a couple of you are saying, this is very true about me. I often get the amount of sleep I need each day. Most people are saying kind of either this is somewhat true about me or this is not true about me, suggesting that, yeah, some of us are experiencing some sleepiness. Okay, let's ask another question, just again to kind of get the pulse of the crowd. Okay, so this next thing is, do you feel that sleep is essential for your health? So you can either one, strongly agree, disagree, or the fourth option there is strongly disagree. What do you think? Is sleep essential for your health? Give you a little time to answer those questions, to select your responses. Okay, so a lot of people, everyone is really endorsing that strongly agree. That's great. Okay, you came to the right talk. That's great. We're going to really talk about and break some of that down and talk about just how sleep supports your health. Last question. How much do your friends and family value sleep compared to other behaviors that are often thought to really be important for your health, like exercising and eating healthy foods? Do you think sleep is valued more than exercise and healthy eating amongst your friends and family? Do you think sleep is valued more than exercise, but not more than healthy eating? Do you think sleep is valued more than healthy eating, but not as much as exercise? And then lastly, sleep is valued less than both. Go ahead and select your responses to that one. again, it's nice to we're not in this world by ourselves, right? We have people that we share this world with, so you can really value sleep, but how are other people thinking about sleep? And this is not uncommon. I often see that people value sleep, but the people that they're around may not value it as much as they might. And so this is really kind of overwhelming people saying that sleep is valued a lot less than both exercise and healthy eating. Okay, thanks so much for that, Rachel. And then we can go ahead and keep getting to know each other more. So my job tonight is to really give you all permission to sleep, to rest, to feel good about that sleep and rest. Because one of the reasons why I study sleep, why I think it's such an interesting phenomenon that I like to explore, is that we all do it. No matter who you are, we all have to sleep. And the longer you put it off, the more your body craves it. It's universal. We share it. And it's not just us. Almost every species that we have identified on planet Earth engages in some sort of sleeping behavior. And it really connects us all. It's something that we share. But what's important is that it's also unique to you. While it's universal, while we all have this kind of shared experience, it's unique to you. Some people on here might cringe at the idea of sleeping in a busy airport, right? Whereas others would be like, yeah, no problem. I can sleep anywhere. A busy airport, that's fine. And so we all do it in our own ways. We all do it with our own people. We all do it in our own environments. And so that for me is what's so inviting about studying sleep from a scientific standpoint, but also why I think we can all kind of relate to it. We can all feel something about it. We all have a story that makes our sleep important. Now, where I might lose some of you is that I'm actually going to argue that sleep is more fundamental and more than anything else you could be doing with your time. If you are spending your time doing anything else and you are tired, sleep is what you should be doing. So I can imagine some of you have a variety of things that you value, that you find important, right? Generally, more broadly, your health, right? Your ability to, in this kind of COVID-19 pandemic world, your ability to not get sick, right? Your ability to stay in your body and your physical body being healthy. Some of you might really be driven or think that your passions in this world are important. The work that you do with your hands, your legacy that you leave is what drives you. It's what motivates you. I'm going to argue that if that's the most important thing to you, sleep is very important for you to spend your time doing. And then lastly, some of you might be thinking about, well, for me, I care about my health. I care about, the work that I do or the legacy that I'll leave, but my relationships are the most important things to me. My relationships are my legacy. Being a good partner, being a good friend, being a good sibling, a good spouse, being a good teacher, whatever it is that you do, and with the people that you do it with, really driving your experiences with the world. I will argue that for all of these things, your health, your work, and your relationships, spending your time getting good sleep is so valuable to each of these things going well in your life. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time in this talk today talking about health, but I'll also highlight how kind of your work and your relationships also shows up when we think about the role of sleep for our lives. So let's first just start with when we don't sleep enough. What happens when we don't get enough sleep? Well, research has shown us that we are at a greater risk for a heart attack. We are more likely to have a heart attack if we sleep less than 6 hours on average per night than if we sleep more than 6 hours on average per night. We are also at greater risk for things like car accidents, with individuals sleeping less than 4 hours at almost 100% increased risk for a car accident. And what's really important about that is that it doesn't stop with car accidents. Having more work-related injuries or more falls in the home are also associated with not getting enough sleep. One thing that, again, is very salient in our pandemic world is your ability to get sick, your vulnerability to catching viruses. And I know a lot of people think about, when you are sick, you're tired, you're sleepy, you have to catch up on your rest. And some people, like my grandmother, she always talks about her sleep predicts her sick. So if she gets sleepy, then if she's a little bit sleepier than normal, she knows that 3 days or so later, she's probably has a cold coming on. And there's actually data to suggest that to be true. So in this study, they had subjects track their sleep before they came into the lab, and then they were exposed to a virus. In this case, it was the rhinovirus, a very typical cold virus that's all around us that we've all been exposed to before. What they found out is that individuals who were sleeping less than 5 hours per night had a more risk of catching that virus than if they were sleeping 7 hours or more per night. So not getting enough sleep really makes you at risk when you're engaging in the world with just the tens of thousands of pathogens that fly all around us all the time. One other thing that is so important and unique to sleep is it helps us lay down our memories of the day. So as we're walking throughout the world and we're learning and we're picking up information and we're understanding the world for ourselves, our brains are involved in that process. The neurons in our brains are creating special patterns of neuronal firing that they do when we learn. This is this run activity. Now, when we go to sleep at night, those same neurons continue to communicate with each other in a similar fashion. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit sparser, but they still talk to each other. And this is what we as scientists call neural replay, in that our neurons in our brain are replaying the experiences of our world at night while we're sleeping. And what does that lead to? Well, that leads to us having much better memory for information that we learn throughout the day after an episode of sleep compared to if we were to stay awake. What's amazing is that some studies in my lab have shown that this is true after a night of sleep, but also just a daytime nap that is intentional and planned can also help you put away some of those memories of your day. Now, beyond the kind of physical health, beyond just making you a healthy person, sleep also is really important for the things that we do, for our interactions with people, and for the work that we do. So thinking about our interactions with people, when you sleep well, when you get good sleep, research has shown that you actually experience less stress, that you have lower reports of feeling angry, even when there are instances in your environment that typically might anger you, and that you have lower reports of experiencing sadness or isolation. Researchers have also shown that positive emotions like happiness, joy, life satisfaction, feeling good about the circumstances that you have increases when people are sleeping enough at night. And then lastly, this one's going to hit those individuals who really care about their work, about their legacy, about their ability to kind of do creative things with the world that they're offered. Sleep has a really interesting role in giving you insight into the world that you have. So studies have shown that when you have a difficult problem and you go to sleep at night on that problem, you wake up with answers that you didn't have before. And this isn't crazy. Some of the best and greatest inventions in the world have been created from sleep-related insight. This has been documented for centuries of people waking up with a great idea. And some of you might even experience that. But what's also interesting is how that kind of creativity could be garnered. If you go to sleep thinking about something that's difficult or hard, a problem that you have that doesn't quite give you stress, but it's something that you really hope to figure out, your brain will start working on that, would engage in that replay while you're sleeping. And that is what kind of gives you that new insight when you wake up. Now, many of you might be thinking that, yeah, man, this is great. This sleep has so many positive things for our health and our relationships and our work and our passions. And this is great. And I'm going to try to make sure I prioritize it. And I highly encourage you all to do that. But it's also important that even though we all have this relationship to sleep, it's ours and it's unique, and that there is this kind of universality to it, that we all experience it. Science has also shown that certain people and certain groups of people sleep more than others. So this is data from the Center for Disease Control in 2014. And what they did is they looked and asked people all across the country, are you sleeping the amount that you wish that you could, right? It's the questions that I asked you at the very beginning. Are you getting the sleep that you think your body needs? What they found was that in some parts of the country, well, I should say a lot of America is sleepy. So even the lowest percentages impacted on this map are around 24 to 30% of people reporting this mismatch, that they're not sleeping as they would like to sleep. Their bodies feel tired. But then you also see that there's some hot spots indicated, right? So you can see that there's some hot spots indicated here out here in the West, and some hot spots in the South. And when we look at individuals that live in these areas, percentages of people that kind of exist in these spaces, we find that there's some racial ethnic groups that are experiencing sleep at less rates than others. And this actually plays out in data when you ask these individuals, in a sense, how much sleep are you getting? Individuals from white ethnic groups, racial ethnic groups, report higher amounts of sleep compared to those from others. And even after considering other things that might account for that, age, gender, education, even some health-related factors like mental health symptoms and body mass index, and even some physical illness like hypertension and diabetes, these relationships persist. And that suggests that there might be some fundamental difference in the way that sleep is spread throughout the society here in the US. Now, this isn't only related to race. So if we look at that same map and we look at a place like Kentucky, where we all are, we also see Kentucky is a particular place where sleep isn't as great. And we see that that is really lines up with the fact that some individuals in the state don't have the same agency over when they can choose to sleep due to their economic status. So we see that these sleep disparities actually persist across income. This is some data from the UK looking at sleep across income, with individuals making more money being the norm here and having less sleep problems than individuals who are making less money reporting greater sleep problems. And we see the same thing looking at employment status. Individuals who are working full time actually often report less sleep problems than those who are economically inactive, those who are having a difficult time or who have dropped out of the labor market. So this suggests that sleep is not just this thing that we all have equal access to. It actually varies by quite a bit of features. And maybe the agency that you have might be related to that. Now, why would this matter? The same racial groups that we pointed out earlier that have differences in their sleep also are at higher risk for different types of diseases. Where in this sample, we're showing that individuals from Black ethnic groups who have higher rates of sleep issues are at greater risk for heart disease. Individuals from Native groups who have worse sleep issues are at greater risk for things like diabetes. Black and Hispanic groups follow shortly behind them. And one thing that is just so valuable when we think about what happens in our brains while we're sleeping at night, that can also really put us on different trajectories towards health decline, is how sleep is related to the kind of initial condition of Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is really defined by the kind of existence of these neurofibrillary tangles and these amyloid plaques. These plaques kind of build up in between neurons in the brain, and these tangles build up within the neuron itself. And they really are based in kind of normal activity that the brain does every day. When you're walking throughout the world and you're engaging with them, your brain creates a little bit of amyloid beta. Now at night, when you go to sleep, your brain clears out that amyloid beta. The fluid that kind of bathes your brain gets pushed through and helps clean the brain at night. When you get less sleep, that's one way that some of these plaques and tangles start to build up and can start to have the brain progress to something like Alzheimer's disease. Now, there's some really new and exciting science. This is one of the very first studies that came out in 2013, showing that sleep is able, when you're sleeping at night, you are really engaging in the metabolite clearance, moving those amyloid, that extra amyloid beta out of the brain during the night. And that if you are experiencing sleep disturbance, if your sleep is disturbed at night, that actually can put you on a trajectory for a greater amyloid beta buildup in the brain years later. Really kind of tying together sleep and Alzheimer's disease pathology. Now, what does that mean for our groups of individuals who have these kind of sleep disparities? When we're talking about these sleep disparities by race and ethnicity, we also see these same sleep disparities in Alzheimer's disease, risk, such that Black individuals are at a greater risk and Hispanic individuals are at a greater risk for Alzheimer's disease than other racial ethnic groups. Now, all of that is an argument for us all to really value our sleep, right? To really protect the time that we get to spend in rest, so that we don't have to justify it or be defensive of it. We can enjoy it. We can choose it. And so that is going to be some of the tips we're going to go into now. And I say it's 4-ish tips because I sprinkle in a couple extras. So the first thing I'm going to say, when it comes to your sleep, get rid of the guilt. Don't feel guilty about sleeping. Sleep, as we've reviewed today, is critical for your overall health. If we think about our brain health, cleaning out those amyloid buildups that we build up throughout the day, sleep is critical for that. Laying down those memories that we learn, the things that we learn throughout the day, laying it down and having that memory replay so that we can have these long-lasting memories of ourselves with our loved ones and doing the things that we enjoy for a really long time throughout our life. Sleep is critical to that. Thinking about metabolism and how changes in insulin might put you at a risk for something like diabetes. Sleep is critical in protecting you from that. Your emotional and mental health. We talked about some data where if you are experiencing sleep loss, you also might experience more negative emotions. But when you are feeling good and you sleep well, you experience more joy and you experience more satisfaction with your life. Sleeping well is really important for that. Your heart health. We talked about the very beginning about how if you don't sleep well, that might put you on a trajectory for something like a heart attack. Not getting enough sleep or sleeping less than 6 hours can put you at greater risk. And then lastly, we talked about one study where if you are not well slept, if you're sleeping less than 5 hours, you had more of a likelihood to catch a virus that you were exposed to. And so what that means is that sleep is really connecting all these areas of our health together. And if we center our sleep, then we can also think about the projections of good health that we will receive as a result. So first, get rid of the guilt. Know that sleep is valuable for you. It's central for you. Next, and this is something that people ask me about often. And if you have any questions about this, in a couple of minutes, I'll go to the chat and we can discuss some things. So if you have any questions about kind of what your sleep need is, send those questions to the chat. I'll give you some kind of guidelines on how you can define your sleep need. The National Sleep Foundation defines kind of sleep need in these ways. You have to think first about your developmental stage. So if you have young children or grandchildren, their sleep need is going to be much more than yours ever would be. And if you are, my age or older, we're looking at, about 7 to 9 hours is which you could be thinking about you might need. But what I say, my tip for defining your sleep need is if you can give yourself the time, you can give yourself a couple of days, maybe on a vacation, or you have a couple of days, especially during retirement, where you can just go to sleep when you feel tired and wake up when you feel rested. And do that for 3 to 4 days. Figure out the average of that time, and that's likely how much sleep you need every day. Once you've defined that, prioritize it. Make it the most important thing you do. Identify your perfect sleep conditions. Create the bedroom of your dreams and make sure that space is safe and protected. And then plan your sleep like you plan your meetings. Plan your sleep like you plan anything else in your day. Schedule it on your checklist and protect that time, prioritize it so that no one else can intrude upon it. We treat a lot of other things in our life that way. If we want to work out, we set a time. If we want to eat breakfast, we set a time. Sleep should also be treated that way. It shouldn't be the thing that you do when everything else is done. It should be prioritized in our lives. And then just a couple of extra tidbits to throw on top, some strategies more broadly to optimize sleep in our lives. Go ahead and set a regular sleep schedule. Try to go to bed at that same time every night. Once you've identified your sleep need, go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time every morning. A big one, try to avoid caffeine after 12 p.m. Caffeine is a very potent stimulant. It can have long effects even after you finish drinking it. So a lot of times I'll talk to individuals who say, I stopped drinking caffeine. I don't have any more caffeine after 2, but I still have a hard time getting to bed at night. Drinking caffeine at 2 could really still impact your nighttime sleep. One that's especially important is avoiding artificial light at nighttime. So the lights in your home, the lights that on your phones, on your electronic devices, try not to bring those things in your bedroom. When you're ready to go to sleep, keep a very dark home. That darkness signals important neural hormones in our brain, things like melatonin that's naturally cycling in our brain, and it lets our brain know it's time to sleep. Making sure that you signal that darkness to your brain an hour before you're ready to go to bed is really important. Lastly, our bodies also respond to temperature to tell us what time it is and what time we should go to bed. So if you take a hot bath or a warm shower before your set bedtime, about 30 minutes to an hour before you're going to go to sleep, you will likely have an easier time falling asleep. Something that I've noticed is that some people once they fall asleep, they have a good time sleeping, but it takes them a while to get settled. A hot shower or a warm bath might help with that, especially if it's well timed. And then lastly, really, while you're avoiding that light in your house at nighttime, in your bedroom at nighttime, when you wake up in the morning, the best thing you could do is let in all of the natural light you could find. Open your shutters, open your blinds, and let all of the sun come in. Even if it's a gray day, even if the sun's hiding, that natural light will signal to your body that it's time for you to be alert and time for you to start your day. And that is also what helps you get back to sleep at night. So bright lights in the mornings, really dark bedrooms at night is the best mixture of things to get your body ready for sleep. Okay. With that, I would like to say thank you for your time and your attention. And I am really thrilled to answer some of your questions and talk with you all, and looking forward to engaging a little bit. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have a question in the chat. And this question says, I lay down to sleep and my brain kicks in and I worry about my sister who is well taken care of. For 3 years, I cannot get myself back to normal. I hate that she's dealing with Alzheimer's. And that is a really, really difficult and hard thing to navigate. I think one of the things that sleep is the most sensitive to is stress. When we're experiencing stress from loved ones, stress from the world, the environment that we exist in, stress from medical diagnoses, stress from others, loved ones' medical diagnoses, sleep is very sensitive to that. So figuring out ways in which we can be there for them and help support them and also help take care of ourselves is critical in navigating these kind of difficult times in our lives. Thank you for sharing that. Another question is, do you recommend any warm drinks before bed? For example, warm teas. So there's quite a few of teas that are really great for helping you kind of get settled and rested. What I normally say is kind of create a pattern around your sleep. Try and do the same things each night. So if you're going to drink a warm tea before you go to bed, that is a great idea. To try to do that every night. Prepare yourself a nice hot cup of tea before you're ready to go to bed. That's what we call a Zeitgeber to your brain. It's an external cue that says, hey, you're getting ready to settle down and go to sleep. Another question is, can you recommend any healthy alternatives to take to help get to sleep, like melatonin? So yeah, I've thought about this a lot. So melatonin is an herbal supplement that you can take that is what we call exogenous. That means it's outside of the body. And then we also have endogenous melatonin that naturally cycles throughout our brain. And the naturally cycling melatonin is very tightly linked to when we'll be sleepy. So melatonin starts to rise when the sun goes down and it's very dark in your environment. And once it gets to kind of half of its height, that's when you start to feel sleepy. And so when you take exogenous melatonin, when you take melatonin from like a pill form, what you want to do is try to time it up with about an hour or so before you're going to go to bed. And you want to take that melatonin at the same time every night. Similar to the tea, create a pattern around it. And that is what's going to be the most beneficial for your sleep. Another question. I've been sleeping 6 hours a night for quite some time. It seems to be natural for me. I wake up without an alarm, etc. Am I doomed? I will say no. So that is why I really drive home to define your sleep need. It's really, really, really critical. Your sleep need is yours. No one can take it from you. No one can change it. It's yours. If you go to sleep and you wake up and you feel refreshed and you need 6 hours per night, you are okay. The individuals who are struggling or having kind of some negative health outcomes have a different sleep need than what they're able to get. Their sleep need is, let's say, 7 hours, but they can only get 6. So they're walking around pretty often tired and struggling with the kind of negative outcomes of sleep loss. I have a question that says, what are some good measurement tools for sleep documentation of those observing patients or loved ones who cannot self-report? Non-proprietary is preferable. The easier to use, the more preferable. That's such a good question. And I get this more often nowadays. I feel like there's so much now around the wearables that, there's a lot of kind of Apple Watches and Samsung Garmin watches, all of these different things that are now getting information about individual sleep. And people are trying to kind of wear those watches a lot more. And I think the hard thing about that is that we don't have access to the data, right? Like, you can't do much with those data. What I do is, especially when it comes to working with patient populations, is get a reliable observer. So if you have a caregiver or a loved one that can document sleep time, that's a really good way to do that, especially for patients who can't document it themselves. Behaviorally, it's not that difficult to dictate sleep. So posture changes, laying on your back, that's a really good sign. Breathing changes. There's ways to detect this person has fallen asleep, especially if the patient can't report it themselves. Other things that work are, or I shouldn't say work, but are available, something that I have my class, I teach here at the University of Kentucky, so something that I have my students use often is the Sleep Cycle app. And that app it doesn't really get you any sort of like specific sleep stages. It's not going to tell you kind of the characterization of the sleep, but what it will do is it will give you an idea. If you can have people use it regularly, it'll give people an idea of kind of what their sleep looks like over time. And so with any of those kind of proprietary devices, it's really not about any given night. The best way to use them is to look at how things change over time. Using it consistently is going to be the difference. So yeah, that's a hard one. There's not a ton of good ones out there that aren't costly, if I'm being honest. Okay, I have a couple more questions in the chat. This one says, what do you recommend if you can't sleep? Get up. What do you recommend to help you get back to sleep? Great question. So there is different advice out there, but this is mine. I would say that one of the main things that you want to think about is how long you've been awake. So if you wake up and you feel pretty alert and you've been trying to go back to sleep for 5 minutes or so and it's not happening, I would suggest getting up out of bed, doing something very low arousal, something that's not going to make you excited. I usually suggest things like washing dishes, folding clothes. I also suggest things like, petting a pet, sitting on the couch, just relaxing. Those are the things I suggest. If you do have phones and devices that have those kind of blue light filters that exist now, doing something on your phone with that blue light filter, not the worst idea. Something very low arousal, something that's not a big deal. Once you start feeling sleepy, go back to bed. The reason why that advice exists is because the best thing you can do is associate your bed with sleep. So if you're laying in your bed and you're not sleeping, your body doesn't get the cue that it needs once you lay down. So once you're having a restless night or you're unable to fall back asleep, it is a really good idea to go ahead and get back up. Like I said, to get back to sleep, do those low activities, things that aren't extremely arousing or exciting. Do something that you normally wouldn't do if you didn't have to, something like the washing the dishes. Is there any truth to the old count sheep, repetitive mental exercise that induces sleepiness? Yeah, there is something to that. Absolutely. So this idea that kind of a mundane activity, that it's repetitive, it will shift your mind from something that's effortful, that you have to pay attention to something that's automatic. And that requires less brain effort, which will allow your body to relax. So some people use that as kind of like a trick to kind of get their body out of that highly aroused state. First, it takes a little bit of effort, and then eventually it starts to wane. And now your body can relax, your arousal will reduce, and you can engage sleep. There's a comment that suggests that the body has a natural circadian rhythm. That's absolutely true. There's two main things that regulate our sleep. One of them is our homeostatic drive for sleep. That is our body's drive to go back to sleep, dependent on how long we've been awake. So that is what makes sleep kind of this thing that we know we need. The longer we're away from it, the more our body craves it. That's what we call our homeostatic drive for sleep. The other thing that really controls our sleep is our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm is our natural clock that exists inside of our body. That clock is really good at telling us what time of day it is. It's also really good at responding to things that we do regularly. And so why I say it's important to do things like take melatonin at the same time every day, that's because you are speaking to your circadian clock in your body. When you take it at the same time every day, you're telling your body that this is now 10 o'clock. I'm going to try to go to sleep at 11. And your body starts to learn that over time. This person says, when changing time zones, I found that I can overcome the jet lag by eating at the same time as the people in that time zone. Any relationship between sleep and eating times? This is another great question. And what I will say is absolutely. So there's a lot of hormones that control sleep and control eating that interact with each other. And so you will, if you've ever stayed up later than you expected to or wanted to, you can imagine getting hungry and wanting things like chips and fries and ice cream. And that's because your body actually starts to think that you're really hungry, and it craves things that are very high calorie that will solve that need quickly. So with the idea of changing time zones, that actually speaks back to that circadian rhythm point, where our body has that natural clock, and it becomes really tied to the environment that we're in. So the time that the light comes up, the time that the sun goes down, that's what our bodies are tied to. When you go to a different time zone, that time is very different than what you're used to. And so if you prepare yourself for changing that time zone, you can, in a sense, kind of hack your jet lag, right? So if you eat, which is a very salient cue to your body that it's this time of day that we do this very important thing like eating, and you do that at the same time as wherever you're going. And people usually suggest doing this about a week or two before you're leaving, changing your kind of timing aligned with the place that you're going. That can really be a nice cue, so that when you get there, it's much easier for your body to shift to that new time zone because you've already kind of given it some cues associated with that. Got some cues in here. There's some notes in here saying, yep, that counting sheep thing definitely worked for me if I had a stressful day when I was younger. And then I have some comments on here. What about sleeping with sounds? The sound of rain or of a fan, is that good or bad? That's a really interesting thing. There's such really, really interesting evidence about kind of acoustic sounds, things that are kind of related to what we hear in sleep. So that's something that you could do and not wake yourself up, depending on kind of how loud that sound is. When you go to sleep, when you sleep at night, one thing that defines our sleep is that we have a lower threshold for stimuli. So the sound that you hear when you're awake, when you go to sleep, it takes a louder sound to wake you up. And so it's not a terrible idea as one of those kind of low arousal activities. If you're not sleeping well, or if you're having a hard time, can you play a little sound, or sit on your couch with some light music? That's probably a really good idea. Sleeping with sounds in the environment, so like going to bed with a fan on, I'm one of those people. I love a good fan to go to sleep with. So I think it's actually completely fine as long as it doesn't become an interrupter while you're sleeping. Yeah, there's a comment in here about working shift work. So the idea that you are working at times when your body prefers to be sleeping, and how that kind of shift work might impact the circadian clock. And that's a big thing. That's actually one of the more prominent sleep issues that people deal with in our society, is that their work schedules are unaligned or misaligned with their sleep times when their body would like to be sleeping. And that creates a lot of kind of issues, some of the things that we've discussed today, with not being able to get to sleep, not being able to get restful sleep, and that also kind of being related to changes in their daytime experiences. Okay, another question. Are dreams produced only during the REM cycle? And how long does that cycle last? And consequently, the duration of the dreams. Do we get more rest during the REM dream cycle? This is a good question. So this is kind of speaking to the fact that we have these different stages of sleep. So when we fall asleep at night, our brains don't just do one thing. They don't just turn off. They actually are very active still. And so we have a couple of different stages of sleep. The two most important are non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, or what we often call REM sleep. And non-rapid eye movement sleep is a condition where we have kind of less neuronal firing in our brain, although there is one little brain area that fires more during that time period. And then in rapid eye movement sleep, we actually have this kind of increased firing of the neurons in our brain, but they are happening kind of desynchronized. It's kind of all over the place. And what that leads to are these very fantastical, exciting dreams that we can have. So these dreams about, flying and that you can fly, or having these really terrible or scary nightmares. Those things usually happen during REM sleep. One of the reasons why is because the area in our brain that's really important to making us rational thinkers and logical thinkers is completely turned off during REM sleep. It gives no context to what's happening. So we can often believe these illogical things to be true while we're dreaming. During non-REM sleep, that time when that one area of our brain is more active and the rest of the brain is a little bit quieter, we can still dream. But those dreams often are like boring. They're just like, sitting at your kitchen table, drinking a cup of tea, or, brushing your teeth. Those dreams still exist. Those things still happen. Some people actually think that the feeling of deja vu, that, oh, I've done this before, or I've been here before, might actually be due to some of those kind of non-exciting, fantastical dreaming things, right? Like you're sitting at your kitchen table, drinking this cup of tea. Maybe you dreamed that the night before, and now you're doing it today. And so that feeling of deja vu might be related to that. The last part of that was kind of, do we get more rest during the REM dream cycle? It's sleep is a kind of a continuum. So we have different stages, but they're all relevant to our restoration. So they all play a role in making us feel good the next day. Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. So sometimes I got this statement that sometimes we can have these dreams that are so realistic, and they really, make you feel as if you're right there in the room with people. That's right. Those dreams can really stick with you. I think that's one of the things that got most people interested in sleep from like a philosophical or a kind of more ancient idea, is that like dreams have been so culturally relevant for so long. So many cultures really rely on interpreting dreams and thinking through what those dreams may mean. Again, one of those kind of situations that connect us all. Oh, this is a fantastic question. I got this question of why do we sometimes dream in this very vivid colors? This is because of that REM sleep that we have, that rapid eye movement sleep. During that sleep stage, we have these increased neuronal firing in the back of our brain, all the way back here. It's called our occipital lobe. And in the occipital lobe is where all of our visual memories are stored. It's where all of the kind of how we perceive everything with our eyes, all that information is stored back there. And during REM sleep, that brain region is extremely active. So that's why a lot of dreams are really kind of filled with very visual content. It's most of our dreams are kind of visual narratives. Few of them are like the sounds that you heard or the, things that you felt. So much of it is what you see. And during REM sleep, the back of the brain, the occipital lobes, are really driving the content of your dream. That's such a good question. And so the colors and the visual experiences are really about that. Okay, I think that might be most of the questions. Rachel, did you have any others that we've been getting?
I do, actually, and you've covered a lot of the topics that we usually hear about. So I want to get a little personal here for a minute and tell you that I love sleep. This whole presentation is probably one of the favorite things I've ever heard. And I come from a long line of people who love sleep. My sisters love it. My mom and dad love it. I mean, we can nap with the best of them. So my question for you is, my mom is 85. She has trouble sleeping at night, but she naps a lot during the day. And I'm wondering if there are things we can do to help her nap less during the day, because I feel like that could be contributing to her nighttime sleep problems.
Yeah.
Do you have any knowledge, expertise in sleep with the aging and what people could do to maybe help them stay up and active during the day so that they're not napping as much?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So absolutely. So there's a couple of things to think about there. So I've done actually quite a few studies on naps. I'm also a napper. And so I will tell you that. What I think about when it comes to naps is that when they're planned, when you are sitting there and you're like, I'm feeling a little sleepy, I'm going to go ahead and plan to lay down and take a nap. Those naps are usually fine in younger individuals as well as in the aging. When you are accidentally falling asleep, you didn't plan to do it. You just wake up on the couch and you're like, oh man, I didn't know I was going to take a nap there. Those ones are not as good. Those ones suggest that you might be a little sleepier than you are willing to admit, and that you should be thinking more about how to kind of really constrain your sleep. So napping during the day really needs to happen before, especially as you get older, earlier and earlier in the day. So naps before noon are usually not going to have a big impact on your nighttime sleep. Even a nap before 1 p.m., not a huge impact on your nighttime sleep. Once you start taking naps after 3 p.m., you're going to have quite a bit of impact on your nighttime sleep. What I will say is, especially when we're talking about older adults, so my grandmother is 87 and she and I go back and forth about naps all the time. And one thing that she and I talk about often is that, the naps that she gets particularly, I really ask her to be thoughtful. As long as she's intentional about them, that's okay. And push them earlier in the day. But also, when she's not sleeping as well at night and she feels like those naps are helping her feel better throughout the day, I give her a break. So at the end of the day, sleep is the full 24 hours. So if you're getting enough sleep in that 24 hours, most people would say, all right, if you feel good after those, couple of naps throughout the day, I'll lay off of you. It's kind of how I think about it.
That's excellent advice. I may talk to my mom about that and see if she'll listen to me. One of the things that we receive questions about sometimes is you talked about the importance of a routine in going to sleep. So going to sleep around the same time every night. But what I'm wondering is, does it matter what that time is, or is that individual to each person?
Oh, that's such a good question. So to a degree, it's individual. Obviously, what's kind of the impact of your world on you is going to determine that, right? So it is a bit individual in that once you can, if you can get that time to really define your sleep need, you'll find out what time you normally get sleepy at night. And then you should set that as your bedtime. You'll find out what time you normally wake up in the morning. You should set that as your wake time. If you have to work, like so many of us do, and you don't have the flexibility to really determine your bedtime and wake time, what I usually say is that for most adults, we need around 7 hours. So trying to establish a routine for yourself where you can realistically and reliably get about 7 hours is going to help you in determining your sleep need. So using that as your baseline and going up or down from 7 is probably a good way to think about it. I think I have another question here. Oh, I have another question here. The effects of not sleeping enough for years, can that be rolled back by sleeping well now? You know, that's a very interesting question that the research is a little bit still is out on. So we're still trying to figure out, you know, can we make up for that sleep loss? What I will say is that our brains are resilient and they can make up for some of that, but they're not perfect in that, like, you know, long years and years and years might have some effect. But it's never too late to try to kind of get back into a schedule. Our brains are resilient. They do kind of have some reserve. And so kind of tapping into sleep as a way to increase your cognitive reserve and your brain reserve is a good way to think about it. Okay, I think that is all of the questions we have in the chat, Rachel. Thanks so much for helping me out.
You're very welcome. I do want to ask you one more thing before we get off of here. Again, another personal question. A lot of us are pet owners.
Yeah.
I'm a new cat mom. I have 2 kittens that have just about upended my life. And my question is, they wake me up a lot in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So if I get a total, I'm old, I'm in that bracket of needing 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. If I get a total of 8 hours of sleep and it's interrupted 3 times by the cats, is that good sleep? Or do I really need a consistent, uninterrupted 8 hours?
Yeah, I'm gonna circle back to the answer that I gave earlier about kind of thinking about naps. There's 2 camps. One camp is that it has to be consolidated at night. Like, you need that consolidated sleep. And one reason for that is that because we have those stages of sleep, that non-rapid eye movement sleep and that rapid eye movement sleep, you have to be asleep for a while to get an amount of each of those stages that make up a solid night. The other camp, and so they would say you need to try to get that consolidated 8 hours. The other camp would say that, you know, good enough is good enough. And so another camp would say that if you get 8 hours, don't toss that to the birds. It's not something to, you know, give up on. It's really about how you feel with that 8 hours. So if it's disturbed and you don't feel good or you feel tired the next day, that suggests it's not working for you. But if you feel good with it, it's probably okay. Another thing about, I would say my advice is I do tend to fall in that first camp, that consolidated 8 hours camp. And one of the reasons is that when you wake up and then you go back to sleep, your body has to kind of settle back down again. So when you get that full 8-hour time and it's not as interrupted, you get to get all of those stages exactly when your body wants them, instead of those interruptions and the settling back down, and the interruptions and the settling back down. But I think that there's good arguments either way.
Mm-hmm. I get it. We actually have a really interesting comment that came in about that. And George says that his cat actually got annoyed with him waking her up. She was a deep sleeper. So it was the reverse of my current situation.
That's hilarious.
We do have one more chat question if we could handle this before we hop off of here. It's, what about using alcohol to help you wind down?
Oh, such a good question. We're actually running a study here at the University of Kentucky in my research lab looking at exactly this. And this is a very common thing. A lot of people do it. Alcohol is often thought of as a neural depressant, which means that it calms down, it reduces neuronal firing, it has this inhibition effect. And so what that usually means is that it helps you go to sleep faster. So when you drink alcohol at night, you often fall asleep faster. The other side of that, though, is that that effect wanes off. And so what often ends up happening is that you wake up after a couple of hours. So when you drink alcohol at night, you might find yourself sleeping and yawning and falling asleep pretty quick. But then about 3 hours, your brain might start running again. You might find yourself awake, wishing you could go back to sleep. So alcohol kind of has this double-edged sword about it. So it can maybe make you fall asleep faster, but it also increases the amount of time that you'll spend awake while you're hoping to sleep.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we have covered all of the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we hop off of here?
I just want to say thank you so much. This was so fun and interesting, such good questions with engaging with you all. And I just really want to make sure that you all know that you have complete permission to get good sleep.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for being a part of our bi-monthly virtual Morning Pointe Foundation Caregiver Cafe educational series. And thank you to all of you who tuned in and asked questions this evening. We really appreciate your time tonight. For additional information, should you have more questions, please reach out to us at morningpointefoundation.com or by calling the number that you see on your screen. If we did not have a chance to answer all of your questions, we will send out a follow-up email with responses to the questions we received. Thank you again. We will see you soon, and good night.